Yeah, we prepared this insight exchange with Sophie, May, and Chris, and so I'll take the lead. So what Sophie was about to say is keep an eye open for an email that will come with amazing news about our January annual meeting, so information about the speakers, information about the place where you can stay, hotel, and let me see if there isn't anything that I'm forgetting. Yeah, registration, program, and hotel. That was her three main elements. So yeah, keep an eye open. And I transition now to the other hat that I have for this meeting, which is facilitating the discussion around the pandemic pivots and the continued resilience of the university food system. This work that I'm going to present to you, the data that I'll present to you, come from a collaboration between May Wang, Christopher Bosso, and Marcus Carson and Matthew Landry. Marcus and Matthew won't present today, but they were a very active part of this work, and I wanted to acknowledge their work up front. For those of you who don't know Chris and May, May Wang is professor at the Department of Community Health Sciences at UCLA, and Christopher Bosso is professor in the School of Public Policy and Urban Affairs at Northeastern University. And if you don't know me, I'm the research program manager for MCURC. So first of all, I wanted to give you a quick overview of the survey from which we have the data. We invited in 2020 and 2021 all the dining directors from the MCURC. And in the last survey, this year's survey, we invited 47 dining directors, and we had an amazing number of 19 that responded. This is so amazing, and thank you so much for all of you who have participated, because we know that these past 2 years have been so challenging, and taking a little time of your busy schedule to answer the questions were very precious, and we hope that we will make the most out of your answers today. So the survey that was sent was covering mainly three main areas. The first one is the impact of the implementing of COVID-19 safety regulations and sustainability goals. The second one was the new initiatives addressing food insecurity on our campus. And the third one were the new initiatives addressing racial equity, because not only we had a pandemic, but also I think a lot of us had an awakening and a strong commitment to change things around food insecurity and racial equity. It won't come as a surprise that the first result from this survey were that the pandemic had strongly affected our university food systems. Even if most universities stay open, at least partially during the pandemic, their model of service was completely transformed from mainly all you care to eat environments to-go boxes, and no ability to eat within the dining halls for our guests and mainly students. As a consequence, many universities saw a drastic drop in their revenues, which consequences are now not yet known to us. Most of the changes brought by the pandemic happened during spring 2020. In spring 2021, most universities were having some students back.
Yeah, you don't have to save any for me.
Sorry? Oh, okay. In spring 2021, most universities were having some students back on campus, but in very limited capacities. Students, staff, and essential workers from the campus community had access to dining services that remained open, whereas in most universities, populations from external communities were not allowed in campus dining anymore. So the first element of the survey was about the impact of these new safety rules and sustainability. The impact of these new safety rules on our sustainability programs. And the pandemic created a huge, sudden, and drastic focus on safety. What you can see here on this slide is the yellow bar show what was in place in campus kitchens during the most restrictive periods of the pandemic. And the green bar represent what was in place during the least restrictive periods of the pandemic. At no point in the history of academia, dining campuses faced such a major crisis. On this slide, you can see all the safety rules our campuses had to implement, sometimes in a matter of hours or from one day to the other, physical distancing requirements, mandatory face coverings, safety training, etc. And this is only in the kitchen, as our dining halls and service were also strongly impacted. Our sustainability goals also shifted, as most respondents declared that the pandemic had a major impact on their sustainability programs. Respondents decreased the student programming focused on education, eating behaviors, and also on sustainably focused food procurements and food waste. There was also an increased focus on plastic waste due to the safety requirements to have to-go containers to distribute the food to students. We all know that sustainability in our university food systems requires collaboration between vendors, students, and a strong commitment from dining services. These results, the results of this survey, show how difficult it was to focus on sustainability during the pandemic and reveal the tension between safety and sustainability. May, as an expert of the evaluations of nutrition programs for children, could you share your perspective on these results and give us your point of view from UCLA?
Sure. Glenn, first of all, I want to say thank you to you and to Matthew and Marcus for all of the work that you have done. And it's been, I think, Christopher and I have really appreciated all of your support and help in this regard. I think with regard to student programming and you know, a lot of the efforts that we have put in the university on sustainability, I think, as you noted, there's this huge tension there between safety and sustainability that almost, I think, every institution faced. But at the same time, I think the food insecurity among our students was already increasing before the pandemic. And I think what happened during the pandemic, as we all know, it kind of really exacerbated those disparities. And UCLA particularly, UCLA was, you know, had been addressing some of these issues before the pandemic. And it's a big thank you to our Basic Needs program. It was actually a program that was started by our own students many years ago. And I'm going to put a link in the website. We have now a CalFresh initiative. CalFresh is the SNAP, California SNAP program. And we've kind of found ways to try to enroll you know, students in CalFresh. And at the same time, also provide virtual cooking classes to kind of help students, you know, better manage the limited resources so that they can eat more healthy.
Hey, Shanti, let me just, there we go. I was on that Stanford UC MCURC.
Sorry. Okay. So anyway, so I just want to comment on that, and then maybe later on we can talk more about food insecurity among students and racial equity issues. So thank you.
Thank you, May. Chris, as an expert in food and environmental policy, what are your thoughts on these results, on the sustainability aspect? You need to unmute yourself.
I try to be a good citizen. Yeah, in fact, Maureen Timmons and I, who's here, Maureen is dining director at Northeastern. She and I were giving a talk last night in a class on resilience and sustainability, and we commented about this collision in some respects over the last year and a half between sustainability goals that most that dining services all over the country have been trying to sort of promulgate and to pursue, which got really slammed in many respects over the last year and a half, 18 months, especially in just the escalating amount of material that had to be used for takeout. I mean, especially, and the difficulty of procuring compostable materials and the difficulty of composting once it leaves your space. I mean, because, all the composting goals, for example, I think a lot of universities were affected by the inability to sort of figure out how to deal with composting once the takeout materials left the dining area. It was easier to capture, materials in the space of the dining hall. Obviously back of house, that sort of continued to some extent, but once, on the consumer side, once those materials were in, containers and left the dining halls, it was anybody's guess as to what was going to happen with those materials. So I think the big struggle on things like local, regional procurement to reduce greenhouse gas emissions wherever possible, on programming, all those things got hit hard. I think we saw that in the data from across the country, and certainly in our own campus. We saw that the sort of sustainability efforts had to be put aside, frankly, because of focus on safety. Because obviously that had to be the focus. And then obviously we saw a lot more waste generated. Yeah, and obviously some schools could reduce that by having compostable materials, others couldn't. So there were supply chain problems.
Yeah, and if I could add one thing sorry, I lost my thought a little bit there too. One other thing I actually wanted to say was that with all of these issues around sustainability, I think there is some concern about the quality of foods that people eat during this very difficult time, and how that might actually affect their risk for chronic diseases much later on in life. I'm thinking about exposure to processed foods, and there's new research right now around the role of ultra processed foods, the microbiome, and diabetes and other chronic diseases. So it's a little bit off track from maybe the conversation here, but I think it's important to think in the long term of the long-term consequences of what all of this might mean.
Yeah, cool. Thank you, May, for this. Akisha, you raised your hand. Please share.
Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me. Where I am, my service is not the best. But one thing, when we talk about sustainability and new models that were happening due to COVID and still are happening, one thing, even though we move back to what is considered all you can eat, we still do to-go containers now. And what we've noticed is, from a sustainability standpoint, our food usage or food consumption have gone up exponentially. However, we're not really sure if it's actually being consumed or wasted, because now you have two things happening. Now we have additional, whether it be compostable paper or plastic items being taken out of the dining hall, including dishes being washed. So now we have another layer of disposables being used. Then you're taking additional food. So what they would usually eat and not put on their plate, they're putting in takeout containers, and if not refrigerated, they're wasting. So now we have more food consumption in terms of food being cooked, labor being put into food being produced. So from a sustainability standpoint, it's almost like way more work, way more production, food being consumed because of these containers. And additionally, the containers themselves are being another contributing factor on top of dishes. So the problem, on top of that, then you look into health and wellness, where the foods that they tend to take out the dining hall are not usually the most healthy. It's the days when you have the chicken nuggets or the fried items. So which means now they're consuming much more of items that may not always be the best items for them.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. I think what you just shared is very much shared with other operations. Mary? Oh, you have to unmute yourself.
Sorry, I took the lead from Christopher. Looking back over, the last year and a half, we were all in just survival mode. I think we just forgot and forget. We didn't. Sustainability didn't come up far enough on the need to do that. We really didn't. Weren't able to pay a whole lot of attention to that. Plus, to get the supplies was just, and still getting supplies is hard. And getting the compostable and getting those that are more sustainable and better products is still very, very difficult. So, I can't say as we're even back to where we were a year and a half ago. Now, one thing that we made some early mistakes when we had takeout, and we did it far too long into it. We wanted students to have whatever they wanted. They were dealing with this as well. So we allowed way too much food to be taken out, way too much food. And we even gave one of those plastic bags like you get at the grocery store that they could put their stuff into. Now that was a mistake, but it was just almost impossible to pull out of that decision. So we're using in our all you care to eat environments that do not have takeout now, we're using much less food than we did when we had the takeout, and I'm sure much less waste as well. But I don't know. I'm hoping soon we can get back to being on track with some of our sustainability goals, but we're not there yet.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think a lot of us share this concern about the supply chain and the labor shortage everywhere in the US. I think these are two very high challenge that the pandemic triggered that were already probably not in ideal condition, and that the crisis made worse. So thank you so much for sharing that. So now we're going to shift to the food insecurity aspect of our survey. Unfortunately, affordability is not a new concern for MCURC. You might remember that our Senior University Administrators Committee has been working on this topic since 2018. The issues to be addressed had included food insecurity, housing costs, cost of textbooks, and most universities already had programs to address food insecurity on their campuses. And this is one of the results that we had from the survey. With the pandemic, these concerns are even stronger, and almost half of the respondents launched new initiatives to address food insecurity. As the pandemic hit, it revealed inequitable access to food on campuses and in the US more broadly. This slide shows some of the initiatives in place on the survey respondent campuses. We were curious if there was a difference between private and public university responses on food insecurity. Just keep in mind that these results are not at all representative of our collaborative. We had 19 respondents, and among these respondents, only 5 were private universities. However, we can see here that if food donation is used by both public and private universities, public universities tend to donate shelf-stable items or prepared meals to on-campus food pantries, whereas private universities give prepared meals to off-campus community food pantries and provided financial support more than public universities. And again, to take with a grain of salt, but we were very curious if this could be expanded to the rest of the collaborative. May, I know you have a strong commitment towards reducing food insecurity for students, and even when you were sharing about sustainability, you cannot help yourself, right, to talk about this aspect. I think they are very much they very much drive you, right? So what is your perspective on this topic, and how did the pandemic affect food insecurity on campus and more globally in the US?
Thank you, Ghislaine, for that question. As you noted, I think, one of our challenges is trying to have people working on all the different components of that food system to actually communicate, collaborate, and work together. Because I think up to now, we've all been very used to working on little silos. Frankly, my research is focused more on the food insecurity end of it, the consumer end of it, if you can think of it that way. But what this pandemic has shown us, from food supply chain issues, etc., they're all kind of connected. And I think the point I'm struggling to make is that when we talk about food insecurity, we have to ask ourselves what it means, and that the definition of food insecurity has evolved over many decades. It took us, a long time to actually come to this place where we recognize that food security is not only about making sure people are not hungry, but making sure that people have nutritionally adequate food delivered in socially acceptable ways. It took us a while to get to that definition. And I think the concern we have right now is, I think with the pandemic, I don't know if everyone's familiar with the data from USDA, the latest data from USDA on food insecurity, but food insecurity rates actually dropped during the pandemic, at the later part of the pandemic. And I published a paper, we showed that they were pretty high in the initial months of the pandemic, but much later on, the rates dropped a little bit. And we think it has to do with the fact that, there were changes in food policy provisions in the delivery of the SNAP program, in the delivery of WIC, and also a lot of the food banks, charitable food system, I think, really went into high drive during the pandemic, which is a wonderful thing in many ways, right? So the concern right now is this going to continue with all of the changes in SNAP and WIC that have made it easier for people to be in the program and to receive those benefits? Or, there's several pieces of legislation going on around to try to keep that going. And one of the pieces that's relevant to colleges is, of course, the EAST Act, or the Enhanced Access to SNAP Act, which is trying to extend some of the temporary policy provisions that made it easier for students to enroll in SNAP. Now, the question that I have, that I've been struggling with right now, is, are colleges the place to be addressing these issues? And this is a short-term approach, I think. We know there's food insecurity on college campuses. The House Rules Committee actually had a hearing on it. But in the long term, I don't think that that's a long-term solution. And so what can we do to try to address some of those structural barriers to healthy food access? And by healthy food access, I think this group, hopefully, we recognize that it's not only about nutrition as in nutrients in food, right? It's about sustainable diets, because that affects climate change. Climate change, who are the most vulnerable people? It's the lowest socioeconomic groups, etc. And the fact that we're seeing a lot of students who are food insecure says something about policies in our country at this stage. Oh, sorry, I'll shut up for now. But
that's the perfect transition, because policy happens to be Christopher's expertise. So, Chris, what's your perspective on that?
I concur with May. I mean, I think we've laid on universities and schools at all levels, in some respects, burdens that, frankly, they're not well equipped to handle. I mean, educational institutions are designed to educate. They're not designed to remedy the ills of the broader society, in a broad sense. For example, I think May's correct. I mean, the changes in that were made in 2021, there were temporary changes to college student access to SNAP, for example. Loosened up some pretty, it's pretty hard for college kids to get access to SNAP prior to 2021. It's still difficult, but a little bit easier. And I'll be interested to see whether that increase in accessibility has measurable impacts on food insecurity among college-age students. But also just the sheer, I mean, May's correct. The food insecurity went down in the country to some extent because, frankly, the federal government in particular poured money into SNAP, into pandemic EBT, into other food programs to do what they're supposed to do, which is respond to major shifts in economic and social conditions. And so it'll be, and also not just that, but also things like the earned income tax credits and other kinds of stimulus package monies flowing through the population that frankly lowered economic insecurity and food insecurity. So we'll be interested to see which of these are continued, because frankly, at the end of the day, campuses can have all the food pantries they want. But that's a Band-Aid on top of a deeper societal problem of food insecurity that, frankly, only the national government is equipped and has the money to do anything about. I mean, this is a national problem, not a University of California, Los Angeles problem or a Northeastern University problem. And you're expecting universities to be able to handle issues of food insecurity when, in fact, these students are coming from a larger societal setting. An economic setting is, I think, a bit over-optimistic. So I concur with what May entirely about it's a policy. Again, I'm a policy person, so I tend to think policy is a solution. On the other hand, in this case, I think we've seen evidence that changes in federal food policies, especially on SNAP eligibility, have had profound, and also changes, by the way, we didn't mention, and May knows this, the changes in how the USDA calculates SNAP benefits to begin with, based on what's so-called thrifty food plan. Those changes were put in place this month, resulting in a 25% increase in SNAP benefits to eligible participants without changing any other thing. They just changed the assumptions about how people eat and how they live their lives. And they had an immediate impact because those assumptions were way, way wrong for a long time. So these are policy responses that have profound impacts.
Thank you, Chris. This is always so interesting to see your perspective. Mary?
I'm trying to get my head around the relationship between the financial piece and the willingness of students to work and food insecurity. Mm-hmm. We are about 40% of our student employees that we need to be running our dining centers right now. And it's not, we've done the things that I think are the right things to do. And I've even talked with students, and there just doesn't seem to be any interest in working. But yet our on-campus cat's cupboard and food insecurity and meals that we do just continue to grow and grow. And I just, some way maybe it's just Kansas State, I don't know, but we've got to get a link to the work and getting your meals. I mean, they can work an hour a day and get meals for a whole day. It's just, so it's maybe it's, I don't know. I'm trying to get a handle on why students are not wanting to work. And I think much insecurity talked about.
Yeah, I have a colleague at Northeastern who's been studying this in a more macro sense about why certain subgroups are not returning to the workforce despite all kinds of incentives. And a lot of it is, again, depending on your student body, Mary, you might be seeing a lot of students who are responding to feelings that it may not be safe, or that in some cases you may be seeing two different groups of students. The students who are using the food pantries and stuff may be a different group of students than the ones who are not working. And also it depends on whether they have, daycare, childcare responsibilities, because you can't get SNAP without working or being on federal work study. So that, sort of degree to which SNAP benefits are tied to work in many respects. And that's true, generally speaking. But you may be seeing a phenomena here of a confluence of absence of adequate daycare, concerns about safety, and other things, colliding together that may be producing this, what seems to be a paradox.
Yeah, obviously every student can't work. I mean, there are
Yeah.
reasons that they can't understand that.
Yeah, and each student
but
body at each university is going to be a little bit different in how this
Sure,
works, plays
Sure,
out.
but
Yeah.
I just think it's beyond that number taken out of there. I think there's still
Yeah.
some opportunity to help with food insecurity through the positions that we have in food service all over the country.
Yeah, thank you, Mary. I think this is an interesting perspective, and thank you, Chris, for answering. Sophie.
Yeah, thanks, everyone. Love this discussion. So I was visiting Paul Huell at CU Boulder in person for the first time actually this week, and I just wanted to share a couple of interesting things. We had essentially a one-on-one insights exchange about the resilience of the university food system, just the two of us. But one of the interesting points on this particular was actually just the demand on students' time for all the activities that weren't available that whole last year, and that especially if you're a senior and this is your last year, or if you're a freshman and you never had a chance to participate. So that was one piece that came up, plus all the opportunities to the safety point.
Yep.
Oh, we lost you, Sophie.
Technical challenges today. If you still can't hear me, I'll just.
We're good. We can hear you.
Okay, sorry about that. Anyway, the insight that I wanted to share was about the intersection between food insecurity and food donations. And this, again, just speaks to something that's not super sustainable, because what Paul was sharing was that surrounding community groups have had a frustration if the certain allotments that are coming from CU Boulder are lower than, say, they were the week before, or if they're not the same kinds of things. Hey, typically we pounds of chicken thighs or what have you. And it's this really interesting thing where, from the point of view of if you're trying to reduce your own, in-house generated food waste to zero, then you should have no surplus food to donate. And so, but then again, you don't want to be leaving the organizations counting on you. So it just speaks again to the point that May showed of just how interconnected all these elements are. And also that ultimately, while a lot of these programs are doing phenomenal work, and no question they're needed at this moment in time, long-term, they may really not be the most sustainable solutions. So thank you. Sorry for the technical challenges.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Sophie. I think you raised an important point. And I know that Laura, after Daniel, Laura will talk also about the food donation. So Daniel, please share.
Yeah, I was just going to add, I think we're talking about a couple of things that we're trying to do a one-size-fits-all for college campuses. Most of the research shows that the food insecurities is most prevalent with the non-traditional students, the students that are a little older, the students that are not living on our campus. And so therefore, we're able to meet most of the needs for students that are living with us. That doesn't mean we don't need to shift our focus over to find out what we can do for those non-traditional students that might be challenged in that area. And it creates some other problems for us. Some of us have created all-inclusive programs, which doesn't fall in the same line of how can I donate meal swipes or some value to a student who does not have food, and how do I make those kinds of programs where we're trying to engage more students from an insecurity perspective of meeting this need. The other thing that I just want to add is part of our challenge here at North Texas is students who have identified as having food insecurity and are utilizing the services that we're providing. Even 6 months, a year later, they're still responding as being food insecure, even though they have now participated in programs that have provided them healthy food options and provided them access, because there is still that socioeconomic monetary need of, once I get myself permanently out of this position, I therefore am no longer food insecure. And the same thing falls into place with our housing challenges. is that you may be able to provide me a solution for right now, but that means, but I'm still housing insecure because there's a date that that ends and my financial situation has not changed.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I saw Chris nodding vigorously on what you were sharing. Laura, I know you had amazing initiatives both from the food bank and also how you supported your local farmers. So please share.
Yeah, so we actually, the University of Montana and our Campus Dining department as a whole did a lot of different things that came out of this time. And I think I heard somebody else say they started a basic needs committee at their school, which if there isn't a basic needs committee already, there should be one. It's been incredibly useful. One thing that we did is we redirected all of our food donations to the place with the most need, which during the pandemic, we had an incredible housing crisis in Missoula, Montana. And so we actually, instead of going with our traditional food donation route, we rerouted all that food donation food to either our campus food pantry or what is called the Poverello Center, which was housing all of our homeless people, and also giving food to the city-run kind of quarantine and isolation housing, assisting them with food with donated stuff. So we redirected all those food donations to the place of the greatest need. We really communicated closely with our local food hub called Western Montana Growers Co-op. I don't know if any of you have something like that, but essentially it's this amazing company that literally brings together over 250 farmers in the area and just congregates all the bulk food for you, and then has bulk purchasing prices. They'll help you get, so they were really trying to work. It helped because they were the ones out in the field helping these farmers kind of get their food on the table, and with all the issues that were going on. And then we just made sure that we put as many dollars as we could into that distribution chain to try to support that. And then we also are looking into a new program. If anybody has a program like this, please send me all the information you're willing to give. We're going to call it the catering cupboard, where all the leftover food from huge catering events, the client would agree to donate that food or be a part of the catering cupboard program. And so at the end of the event, when we have all that leftover food, we basically would send a big email out through our basic needs department with all the students that they have within their contacts, saying, hey, there's free food here, free really good food, bring your containers, come get it, right? And kind of like a one-time thing, but to try to divert that waste. And that's something that I know other universities have been doing in different facets. So I'd love to hear if anyone has stuff on that. We're just starting that. We also, the basic needs through the pandemic actually turned into an ASUM funded department, which is awesome. So now we have a basic needs, they call it the bare necessities department that has its own director that basically is covering the basic needs of our students. It includes housing, it includes dinings, and it has the leaders of every single auxiliary department on campus at that table, trying to make sure that because we're going through a huge housing crisis in Missoula. I mean, we have multiple students that are just living in vans because they can't, and actually purchased a meal plan. So because they don't have anywhere to cook or do their dishes or anything like that, because there's no housing available, it's too expensive. So those are kind of a number of things we've been doing. And then we also, one thing, and I don't know if anyone else is struggling with this, but we can't get students because of the pay. We can't pay them as much as Costco does. We can't pay them as much as Taco Bell does. I mean, Taco Bell is starting at $16 an hour, and our pay rates are set at the Board of Regents level for the state. So the most we can pay our students are $11 an hour. So of course they're going to Costco, right? Where they're making closer to 20. So that's just something we have no idea how to even incentivize or fix, because free food does not seem to incentivize them to come work for us, which is just weird. But so yeah, the pay is just a comment on everyone's staffing issues. We're just struggling with pay. I think if we could pay them more, it'd be better. But yeah, those are our new stuff.
Thank you so much, Laura. And I hope that you've been heard and that you will have a lot of emails. Maybe if you could put your email in the chat, that would help people reach out.
Sounds good.
But thank you. We need to move on to the last topic of this discussion. And thank you so much for sharing. This is so rich and so interesting. So the last section of the Insight Exchange is dedicated to racial equity initiatives on our campuses and within our dining services. Most participating universities were already involved in initiatives addressing racial equity. However, most respondents declared they were doing or going to do more. And in particular, they wanted to offer specific support and/or resources to team members of color and to create safe spaces to discuss racial inequities. And personally, I feel that MCURC is a great safe space to discuss all of our challenges and this one as well. Chris, so on this slide, you can see in green all the initiatives related to racial equity in place before the events, and in yellow, all the ones that were launched after the events. And Chris, I wanted to ask you, one of the first executive order of the Biden administration was on advancing racial equity and support for underserved communities through the federal government. Can you tell us more about this and how it applies to university food systems?
Thanks, Ghislaine. The Biden administration, the executive order that Biden promulgated upon coming into office, it essentially reversed most of the Trump administration's sort of directives on discussing on federal government agencies and some contractors discussing racial equity, racial injustice. Again, especially following George Floyd and other episodes last summer 2020, and I mean, to put it tactfully, essentially that executive order pretty much simply just reversed what Trump had done. The Trump administration had pretty much prohibited a lot of diversity, equity, and inclusion discourses in federal agencies and contractors, and so and basically was trying to sort of Trump administration was spending a fair bit of time trying to really narrow the range of what federal agencies and contractors could do on the racial equity sort of and diversity and inclusion fronts. And the Biden administration simply reversed that for the most part. And so the effects on university dining services, I don't think are direct. I think it's just a change in the general attitude of the federal government under Biden as opposed to Trump, and it's not surprising if you understand, both of these administrations and where they were coming from. And so I think the Biden administration is going to be far more likely than the Trump administration to, allow and in fact enable these kinds of discourses and efforts to, on racial equity, racial injustice, than the Trump administration was. I think that's pretty much straightforward. And I think you're going to see directives by right now they're still gathering comments from and they're still working on some plans, but it strikes me that the Biden administration is likely to send directives out to federal agencies and contractors who are contracting to the federal government, which includes a lot of companies, about, sort of being more aggressive in having these discourses, being more aggressive in addressing issues of racial injustice and racial inequities in the workplace than the Trump administration was inclined to do. So I think you're going to see a different tone from the Biden administration than you saw under the Trump administration. And I think that's just the general point about, again, how it affects different universities depends on, again, whether public or private, and also, frankly, a lot of it is going to be depending on where you are. But I think that the Biden administration is likelier to remove obstacles to these kinds of discussions, these kinds of activities, and indeed promote them.
Thank you for this, Chris. May, what kind of initiatives do you see as crucial to advance racial equity in the US, and what could be the role of universities in this?
So, thank you, Italy. Great question. I want to start off maybe by just reminding everyone, I think we know this, there is a a very difference in the meaning of between equity and equality, right? And equity is really about recognizing that people are at different places and some people might need more support and help to kind of get to a certain point. And I think universities in general, we haven't really dealt with it very well, you know, from, at least from the academic perspective. So I am talking about, you know, students coming from different K to 12 backgrounds, etc. So if we start thinking about, so going from academic curriculum to food to people do also come to the university, all of us with different taste preferences, different eating behaviors, etc. Right? And so I think sometimes we struggle with this issue of, for example, I know that many of us try to get a lot more students to go plant-based. Now that might not, you know, student, depending on students' backgrounds, going completely plant-based, people might not be quite ready for that, right? So I guess I don't know if I have a solution. It's more of a question. It's like, what do we mean by equity here? And I know, having worked with K to 12 schools on food service, you often hear food service directors saying, we try to change the menu and provide all of these, but the students want more, whatever, hot dogs, corn dogs, or whatever. I mean, this is the younger kids. But I think in the college setting, we're still also addressing some of those issues, but maybe not as clear cut. And I mean, there is an effort right now where we're trying to get more students to choose plant-based options, which I think in terms of climate change and all that, I mean, you know, my utopia, right? Can you imagine if everybody went plant-based at every university, the impact we could have? But that's more of a dream that much further down the road. But in the immediate, right now, I think we have to think about what can we do to, you know, increase the supply and access to healthier, sustainable diets on campus, and at the same time, increase that demand. So I don't know if Jenny J's on this at all, but Jenny's a wonderful colleague in environmental engineering. She's very much in sustainability. So you know, she's been teaching all these huge undergraduate classes above on food sustainability, above, you know, her usual teaching load, and just getting students to really be thinking about these issues. So whatever drives them, right? If we supply the healthier foods, assuming we increase the access to it. At the same time, I think we mustn't forget the demand side, right? How are we going to motivate students to consume more of the healthier foods? And it cannot come from a place of judgment. It cannot come from a place of, you know, we're providing healthier foods and the students are not coming, you know.
Thank you so much for that. I feel that what you are saying is that there is no magic solution, right? And we have to work together and to adapt to our different conditions. This is also why I was so happy to have Laura and others from states that have a different view on sustainability and a different approach. You know, living now in Cambridge, I can see that water management is very different in Massachusetts than California, right? And this is why also, like, I feel all our universities have to adapt to their own local ecosystem and build from that, while also keeping inside the goal, like the main goal that, for example, the Eat Lancet helped us identify. So thank you so much for sharing that. In conclusion, I wanted to share with you the word clouds of the two phases of the survey. Sorry, that's telling me that we are about time. And even if the words are not exactly the same, you can see that our focus has been and is and will be our students and community. And I think that resonates a lot with what you just said, May, about, you know, starting with our local ecosystem and building from there. And that's really the focus of our organizations. just, I wanted to conclude on this data, and maybe we'll have a few minutes for any last questions. But yeah, I wanted to, on behalf of May, Chris, Marcus, and Matthew, who all worked with me on this survey, wanted to thank the MCURC Leadership Committee and all the participants, all the dining directors that answered the survey. It was amazing for them to dedicate time to answer our questions in these uncertain times. One of the biggest learning of this project is the power of the collaborative and how critical it is to continue the work and to collaborate on these extremely important and complex topics. We are not alone in this, we are together, and this is very heartwarming. I also want, and with that in mind, I wanted to thank particularly our MCURC co-founder, Dr. Everett and Greg Rasher, for their vision and support in addressing these issues. We wouldn't be there if it wasn't for them. And our MCURC co-directors, Eric Montel and Sophie Egan. I know Sophie is there, and yeah, thank you so much for your amazing leadership, your tireless work to make our food system more just and more sustainable. I want to thank our sponsor organization for their generosity, as now more than ever, their support is crucial for our organization. So if there are any other questions, please share in the chat, and otherwise I'll leave the mic to Sophie if she's able to share.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, I'm going to stay off video. So if you can go to the next slide, just wanted to make a plug for the upcoming 7th annual all-member MCURC meeting. It's January 19th to 20th. Hosted by Stanford University. You will be receiving shortly the public schedule and the speaker lineup. And I just wanted to let you know we have some remarkable speakers confirmed, including Stanford University President Mark Tessier-Levine, Hattie Hill, formerly of Women's Food Service Forum, who is no stranger to many of you, Jamie Beck-Alexander, Executive Director of Drawdown Labs, countless researchers, leaders from Chef Tanya Holland, Chef Ileana de la Vega, Chef Mai Pham, and many, many others, including our own student fellows and so forth. So it's an action-packed program, and I just want to make sure that you see the registration details. We have new links that you'll use. If you've already registered, your details will be carried over directly. There's new hotel information. And so please keep your eyes peeled for that email, and we really hope to see all of you there. So this is our last Insights Exchange of the year. We look forward to collaborating through our working groups, through our newsletters, which will also have a year in review recap of all the great milestones and so forth for the collaborative, and please be in touch in the meantime. But really delighted that you could all join us today, and thank you so much, Ghislaine, for really organizing and spearheading this. Thank you to Chris and May for your phenomenal.
Ghislaine, can I say something really quick? Do I have time to say something really quick? You know, you mentioned this all fits together, and it's just kind of hard to put your finger on it. But the things that MCURC can do is to really, I think, put dining services and food service in the light of a profession, a more than just a place to eat on campus. And I think what they can do with their work in sustainability or work in whatever area, all the areas that we're working on, it's going to raise the stature of dining services. And we can no longer put up with having employees at the low rung of the university, the lowest paid people, the ones that have to be here during COVID, the ones that have to be here when it snows. And a lot of our employees are of the lower socioeconomic level. And also many of them are from different countries and diversity. So if we can get the stature up, hopefully we can get the pay up, and that they can't be just considered the lowest level. And so anyway, I think MCURC and what we do and how we project it and how we market it and how our bosses see it I think is going to help us in that regard. It's going to take a little while, but it's going to help us. My point.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think, you know, the Education and System Innovation Working Group and especially the Fellows Program is focused on this, raise the new generation of food system leaders and elevate these roles within dining and beyond in the food system. So thank you, Mary, and yeah, thank you all for your participation, the amazing contribution in the chat and live. We're looking forward to see you in January and really hope that you will be able to travel. Thank you.